Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I am Christine Dixon of The Ordinary Sacred, and this is my third video in a series called No Pathologies in Internal Family Systems. So I'm going through different disorders that you might find in the DSM-5 and explaining them from an IFS lens, what parts might be involved. You can go check out the previous two that I have done on manic depression or bipolar and obsessive compulsive OCD. Today, I'm going to talk about borderline personality disorder. Even the personality disorders that many people will say someone's born with, this is a pathology that they just have to live with, medicate, manage, right? I'll explain it in terms of parts. So borderline personality disorder, the hallmarks of it are mood swings, outbursts of anger, impulsivity, and an underlying fear of abandonment. So if you know IFS, you might be able to translate that pretty easily into parts, right? They likely have exiles that are stuck back in times of very painful abandonment. And when those exiles get activated, first of all, their big emotions and the burdens, the fears they hold come up. And then firefighters rush in to protect them by having angry outbursts or impulsive activities like addictions or even risk-taking, suicidality, those things. So you can see that this is a very heavily exile and firefighter driven system. I am going to share with you the PowerPoint that I made for the monthly IFS practitioner group on borderline personality disorder. So you can benefit from some of the things that I said there. So if you or someone you know suffers from borderline personality disorder, you know that it's a really painful, excruciating thing to experience because often our exile energy is really intense and our firefighter energy is really intense. So sometimes a lot of modalities will utilize managers to try to balance the system out. I'm not opposed to that. I think sometimes that's the first order of defense, is to help the person develop parts that have some managing roles. But ultimately, that's not going to fix or heal the root issue, which is these exiles that are stuck back in really traumatic times that need to be witnessed, reparented, retrieved, brought into the present, and unburdened, and then integrated, and to have the secure attachment with the wise and loving adult self in the system. Okay. So borderline personality, clients who are diagnosed with borderline personality, like I said, usually have extreme firefighter parts: addiction, rage, self-harm, suicidality. So if someone goes into a mental health setting and they have these firefighters, you know, often they'll be diagnosed with borderline personality. So those parts, firefighters are helping numb and escape the pain of the exiles that are stuck in moments of extreme trauma, which is usually violence or sexual abuse. And so in some ways, it's like they have these really young parts who experienced just unfathomable things at a very young age when they could not protect themselves. And I mean, just imagine that there's a very young child stuck back there, right? And the firefighter parts are also young, and they're doing the very best they can to protect, right? To lash out, to fight. That fight response makes complete sense, right? Or to try to numb, whether it's through through sex or through pornography or through cutting, through all kinds of substances. These are often people who've experienced some pretty extreme trauma. What can also happen in people, again, with this extreme trauma and then these intense firefighters, is that there's often a polarization between what are called recruiters who desperately seek redeeming relationships and distrusters who try to sabotage the same relationships. So that can, in relationships, give this effect of kind of push-pull, push-pull. Put someone on a pedestal and bring them way down, right? They don't meet the expectations. You give them really high expectations and they don't meet them, and so there's devastation. So when people describe borderline personality disorder, they often talk about there being really intense or difficult relationships, that it causes a lot of issue in relationship. And so if you look at it from attachment theory, right, you can understand that there are parts that are young and feel very desperate to gain attachment, but also very distrustful once they get close to attachment. So again, their response is coming from very young parts, and it makes sense. So the extreme nature of the client's parts can often activate a practitioner's parts. So it's very important to check our own self-energy. So when I was originally giving this talk, it was for the monthly IVAS practitioner group. And that's the first and main thing, I teach in that group, is to always check for our own self-energy. And whenever someone has really intense exiles or protectors, but especially firefighters can feel really scary sometimes to a practitioner. Suicidal parts, self-harming parts, addictive parts, raging parts. It makes complete sense as a practitioner that you might have parts that come up, whether you experience some of that in a caregiver growing up, or just you might have protected parts that come out for you. So it's always important to check for your own self-energy in regard to these intense parts, and to understand that they are highly protecting the other person, that there's something really, really vulnerable behind them. And then once you have self-energy, you can get really curious with them and not feel afraid of them, because they can smell it if you're afraid of them. The parts can. And then the last thing I just want to recommend is reading the article Depathologizing the Borderline Client by Richard Schwartz himself. So I have it here, the link, but I think you can probably just look up Depathologizing the Borderline Client and you'll find it. It's on at the healingtraumacenter.org. It's an excellent article. Dick Schwartz himself has worked with many people with this diagnosis, and does an amazing job, holding self-energy and really finding those young, brutalized parts who are stuck, stuck in past moments of trauma. So I hope that is helpful to you, whether it helps you understand your own system or perhaps a loved one's or your client's systems. The more extreme behavior that a person has, to me, it's a given that the deeper, more extreme trauma they have experienced. So as you experience a person, yourself, a loved one, a client who has really, really big protectors, whether they're managers or firefighters, you can know that they are protecting very vulnerable parts underneath. That doesn't mean that you need to put yourself in harm's way if those parts are harming you. It can be a both and, that you understand that it's not personal, that it's not about you. And sometimes, especially if you're a practitioner, those parts will come out to try to test you, right? They will try to say, provocative things. They're really testing to see if you will have parts that will come out and abandon them, reject them, etc. So know that, and know that it's not personal. And of course, do whatever you need to do to, so that you're not in harm's way. But if you can stay the course and stay in self, and self's not a pushover. Self's not, oh, okay, whatever. It's strong, it's confident, it has a the somatic body position of, is a strong core and a straight back and a soft face and an open heart, right? And you can see beneath to the vulnerable parts underneath and appreciate the protective nature of those parts. So if you have your own experiences in your own life with borderline personality disorder, or loved ones, or you have questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below.